The alarm pierced through the sterile corridors of Station Kepler 7 like a dying scream. Senior Security Officer Vexai's four arms moved in perfect coordination across his console, each appendage working a different control surface, as red warning lights bathed the security center in an ominous glow. His compound eyes, adapted for his homeworld's eternal twilight, processed the incoming data streams with mechanical precision. "Breach in Sector 7G, announced his partner, Officer Zinter, her serpentine neck craned toward the holographic display floating between them. "Life support systems show unauthorized biological signatures." Vexai's mandibles clicked in irritation. Sector 7G housed the station's most dangerous specimens, creatures collected from the outer rim worlds that even the Galactic Council's xenobiologists approached with extreme caution. The containment units in that sector were designed to hold beings that could tear through reinforced duralloy with their bare claws. "How many signatures?" Vexai asked, his voice carrying the subtle harmonics that marked him as a member of the chorus species. "That's the problem," Zinter replied, her forked tongue flicking out to taste the recycled air. "I'm reading 4 distinct biosignatures, but only 3 are supposed to be there. The Kithrian cubs from the raid on Meridian Station." Vexai felt his chest plates tighten. The Kithrian cubs weren't just dangerous, they were traumatized. Their parents had been killed during a pirate raid, and the cubs had been rescued by a Galactic Council peacekeeping force. But rescue was a relative term when dealing with Kithrians. The species was notorious throughout the galaxy for their aggression, their pack mentality, and their complete inability to bond with any other species. Adult Kithrians stood nearly 3 meters tall, possessed claws that could slice through most known materials, and had been responsible for 17 different interspecies conflicts over the past century. The cubs, while smaller, were arguably more dangerous. Young Kithrians were driven by instinct and fear, making them completely unpredictable. They had already injured 3 xenobiologists and destroyed 2 containment units since arriving at the station. The only reason they were still alive was because galactic law prohibited the execution of juveniles, regardless of species. "Could be a sensor malfunction," Vexai suggested, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. "Negative," Zinter's head swayed side to side. "I've run 3 diagnostics. There's definitely something else in that cell." Vexai stood, his exoskeleton creaking slightly. At nearly 2.5 meters tall, he was considered small for his species, but his 4 arms made him exceptionally effective in combat situations. 2 arms could handle weapons while the other 2 managed shields or additional equipment. "Alert the emergency response team," he ordered. "Full quarantine protocols. If something got into that cell with those cubs, it's either already dead or it's something we need to contain immediately." The 2 security officers moved through the station's corridors with practiced efficiency. Station Kepler 7 was one of the Galactic Council's premier research facilities, home to over 3,000 beings from 47 different species. The station orbited a gas giant in the Kepler system, far enough from major shipping lanes to maintain secrecy, but close enough to civilization to receive regular supply runs. As they approached Sector 7G, Vexai could hear something that made his compound eyes widen in surprise. Sound was traveling through the walls, but not the growls and roars he expected from agitated Kithrian cubs. Instead, he heard something that his translator unit couldn't quite process. A rhythmic, melodic sound that seemed almost peaceful. "You're hearing that too?" Zinter asked, her head tilted in confusion. "Affirmative, but it doesn't match any known Kithrian vocalizations." They reached the containment area and immediately activated the external observation monitors. What they saw on the screens defied everything they knew about xenobiology. The 3 Kithrian cubs, each roughly the size of an adult human but far more muscular, were curled up in a tight group in the center of the cell. Their golden fur, marked with the distinctive black stripes that made Kithrians such effective hunters, was clean and groomed. But most shocking of all was what lay at the center of their protective circle. A human female, apparently sleeping peacefully with all 3 cubs pressed against her body. The cubs' massive heads rested on her torso and legs, their breathing synchronized with hers. The melodic sound they had heard was coming from the human. She was humming some kind of tune while she slept. "Impossible," Vexai whispered, his mandibles clicking rapidly. "Kithrians don't bond with other species. It's biologically impossible. Their brain chemistry literally prevents them from forming attachments to non-Kithrians." Zinter's neck extended closer to the monitor. "Look at their stress indicators," she said, pointing to the biometric readouts. "All three cubs are showing relaxation patterns I've never seen before. Their cortisol levels are at baseline. Their adrenaline production has dropped to normal ranges." This was unprecedented. Since arriving at the station, the cubs had maintained constant high-stress indicators. They barely slept, refused most food, and attacked anything that came near their cell. The station's xenobiologists had predicted that the cubs would either die from stress-related illness or would need to be sedated permanently. "How did a human get into that cell?" Vexai asked, though he was already checking the security logs. "That's Dr. Sarah Chen," Zinter said, accessing the personnel database. "She's listed as a xenobiological consultant, arrived on the last supply transport 3 days ago." Vexai pulled up Dr. Chen's file. Born on Earth, she held advanced degrees in xenobiology and interspecies psychology from the University of New Geneva. Her credentials were impressive, but nothing in her background suggested she would be capable of what they were witnessing. "She's not authorized for Sector 7G, Vexai noted, scrolling through the security permissions. "Her access level doesn't extend to containment areas." "Then how did she get in?" Before Vexai could answer, their communication system crackled to life. "Security to all stations," came the voice of Chief Security Officer Mordek. "We have reports of a missing person. Dr. Sarah Chen was last seen in the Botanical Gardens 12 hours ago. Consider this a priority search." Vexai and Zinter looked at each other, then back at the monitor. Dr. Chen was clearly not missing. She was sleeping peacefully with 3 of the most dangerous juveniles in the galaxy using her as a pillow. "Should we wake them?" Zinter asked. Vexai considered this carefully. Standard protocol would be to enter the cell immediately and extract the unauthorized person. But the cubs' stress levels were at their lowest point since arrival. Any disturbance might trigger a violent response that could endanger Dr. Chen. "Contact xenobiology," he decided. "We need a specialist down here before we do anything." Dr. Kethmos arrived within minutes. The tall gray's elongated limbs moved with typical efficiency as he examined the monitor displays. His large, dark eyes took in every detail of the unprecedented scene. "Fascinating," he murmured in his species' characteristic whisper. "The cubs appear to have adopted protective postures around the human. Notice how their bodies are positioned to shield her from potential threats while maintaining clear sight lines to all cell entrances." "How is this possible?" Vexai asked. "Every xenobiological study confirms that Kithrians cannot form interspecies bonds." Dr. Kethmos was quiet for a long moment, his elongated fingers dancing over his portable analysis unit. "All previous studies involved adult Kithrians," he said finally. "These are juveniles, and they've experienced significant trauma. It's possible that their normal behavioral patterns have been disrupted." "But why this human specifically?" Zinter pressed. "Unknown. Dr. Chen's file indicates no special training with dangerous species, no previous experience with Kithrians. In fact, her specialization appears to be botanical xenobiology, studying plant life from other worlds." As they watched, Dr. Chen shifted slightly in her sleep. The movement caused the largest cub to lift his head and look directly at the security camera. The young Kithrian's eyes, a deep amber color that seemed to glow in the cell's lighting, showed none of the feral aggression they had displayed previously. Instead, there was an alertness and intelligence that seemed almost protective. The cub made a soft chirping sound, another behavior that contradicted everything they knew about the species. Kithrians were known for their roars, growls, and threatening vocalizations. They didn't chirp. Dr. Chen's eyes opened slowly, and she smiled as she saw the cub watching her. She reached up with one hand and gently scratched behind the massive creature's ears. The cub's eyes half closed in what could only be described as contentment. "She's been awake," Dr. Kethmos realized. The humming wasn't sleep sounds, she was consciously calming them. "But how did she get into the cell?" Vexai insisted. Dr. Kethmos manipulated his analysis unit, bringing up structural scans of the containment area. "The cell's integrity is intact. No evidence of forced entry. The locking mechanisms show no signs of tampering." "Then she had authorization," Zinter concluded. "Negative. I checked her access levels personally." Dr. Chen sat up carefully, mindful not to disturb the cubs more than necessary. The three young Kithrians adjusted their positions, but remained close to her, their large bodies forming a protective barrier around her much smaller form. She looked directly at the security camera and waved. "She knows we're watching," Vexai observed. Dr. Chen stood up slowly and the cubs rose with her. The largest cub, probably the alpha of the small pack, remained between her and the cell door. The other two flanked her sides. Together, they moved toward the cell's communication panel. Dr. Chen activated the intercom system. When she spoke, her voice was calm and carried a slight accent that the universal translator identified as originating from Earth's North American continent. "Hello," she said simply. "I imagine you have some questions." Dr. Kethmos leaned toward the communication panel. "Dr. Chen, this is Dr. Kethmos from Xenobiology. We need to understand how you gained access to this containment cell and how you've achieved this unprecedented bonding with the cubs." Dr. Chen smiled, and one of the cubs nuzzled against her shoulder. "The access was easier than you might think. As for the bonding," she paused, looking down at the three massive creatures who had clearly claimed her as part of their pack. "I think that requires a longer conversation." "We need you to exit the cell immediately," Vexai interjected. "These creatures are classified as extremely dangerous." The largest cub's head snapped toward the speaker, and a low growl rumbled from his throat. Dr. Chen immediately placed a hand on the creature's neck, and the growl stopped. "I don't think they like the idea of separation," Dr. Chen said. "And honestly, neither do I. These aren't dangerous creatures, officers. They're traumatized children who needed someone to show them they were safe." Dr. Kethmos manipulated his scanner again, focusing on Dr. Chen herself. "Fascinating. Dr. Chen, are you aware that you're producing unusual pheromone patterns? Your biochemistry appears to have shifted in ways that are triggering protective responses in the cubs." "I suspected something like that," Dr. Chen replied. "It started shortly after I arrived on the station. I've been feeling different, more aware of the emotional states of others, more empathetic." "Dr. Chen," Dr. Kethmos said carefully, "have you been exposed to any unusual substances recently? Any new medications or treatments?" Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment, clearly considering whether to answer. Finally, she nodded. "There was an incident during my transport here. We encountered a spatial anomaly near the Vale Nebula. Everyone on the ship was exposed to some kind of energy field. The ship's medical officer said it was harmless, no lasting effects." The three specialists looked at each other. The Vale Nebula was known for its unusual properties, but most of the phenomena there were considered purely astronomical. "Dr. Chen," Dr. Kethmos said slowly, "I think we need to run some tests, both on you and on the cubs. What you've accomplished here shouldn't be possible according to everything we know about Kithrian biology." One of the smaller cubs had moved to the cell door and was sniffing around the frame. Suddenly, the cub began pawing at a specific section of the wall near the door controls. "What's he doing?" Zinter asked. Dr. Chen moved toward the cub and the other two immediately followed. "I'm not sure," she said, placing her hand where the cub was pawing. "He seems to be indicating something." The moment her hand touched the wall, a hidden panel slid open, revealing a secondary control system that wasn't part of the cell's standard configuration. "That's not supposed to be there," Vexai said, his mandibles clicking rapidly. Dr. Kethmos was already scanning the revealed panel. "It's definitely not standard equipment. This appears to be some kind of override system, but the technology is unfamiliar." Dr. Chen examined the panel closely. "The markings are strange," she said. "They're not in any language I recognize, but somehow I understand what they mean." "What do they say?" Dr. Kethmos asked. Dr. Chen traced the symbols with her finger. "Emergency, awakening, system, trial, preparation." She looked up at the camera. "I think someone knew I was coming." The largest cub moved to Dr. Chen's side and placed his massive paw on the panel next to her hand. The moment their contact combined, the panel began to glow with a soft blue light. Throughout the station, every monitoring system connected to Sector 7G suddenly displayed the same message in dozens of different languages. "Subject integration successful, proceeding to next phase." In the security center, alarms began blaring as unauthorized system accesses were detected throughout the station. But these weren't random intrusions. Someone or something had been waiting for this exact moment. Dr. Chen looked at the camera with an expression that mixed confusion and growing understanding. "I don't think my arrival here was as random as I believed," she said quietly. "And I don't think these cubs were brought here by accident either." The largest cub nuzzled against her shoulder and made that soft, chirping sound again. But now, with the hidden systems activated, the sound was being translated by the station's computers. The translation appeared on every screen in Sector 7G. "Mother is home, family is complete, time to wake the others." Dr. Kethmos looked at his colleagues with wide eyes. "Others," he whispered. As if in response to his question, containment cells throughout the station began displaying new biosignatures. Creatures that had been in deep stasis for months, years, or in some cases decades, were beginning to wake up. And every single one of them was moving towards Sector 7G. Dr. Chen felt the change before the instruments detected it. A warmth spreading through her chest, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, accompanied by an awareness that made her skin tingle. She could sense movement throughout the station, not just the 3 cubs pressed against her, but dozens of other consciousnesses stirring from deep sleep. "The containment fields are fluctuating," Vexhai announced over the intercom, his voice tight with concern. 17 different cells are showing power anomalies." Dr. Chen placed her hand flat against the hidden panel, and immediately her mind was flooded with images. She saw corridors she had never walked, creatures she had never encountered, and faces of species she couldn't name. But underlying all of it was a sense of recognition, as if she had known these beings her entire life. The largest cub, whom she had begun thinking of as Apollo due to his golden coloring, pressed his enormous head against her shoulder. Through their contact, she felt his thoughts, not words, but concepts and emotions that her human brain translated into understanding. "Pack scattered, pack sleeping, pack waiting for Mother Bond." "Dr. Chen," Dr. Kethmos's voice carried a note of urgency. "We're detecting massive biochemical changes in your physiology. Your neural activity is off the charts, and we're reading energy patterns that shouldn't be possible for human biology." She looked at the camera, her eyes reflecting a depth that hadn't been there hours before. "It's not just me," she said. "Whatever happened in that energy field near the Veil Nebula, it did something to every living thing on that transport ship, but I think I was the only one who was compatible." Through the station's internal sensors, she could feel them awakening. A crystalline entity from the ice moons of Rigel VII, its consciousness like cold fire. A gaseous being from the storms of Kepler 442b, thoughts flowing like wind patterns. A pack of wolf-like creatures from a world that had no name, their minds sharp and hunting-focused. All of them had been brought to Station Kepler 7 over the past 2 years. All of them had been classified as dangerous, untamable, or unsuitable for standard diplomatic contact. All of them had been placed in induced stasis to prevent them from harming themselves or others. And all of them were now moving toward her location. "The emergency containment protocols have been activated," Zinter announced. "All sections are under lockdown." Dr. Chen smiled sadly. "That won't stop them. Physical barriers aren't going to contain what's happening here." The 2 smaller cubs, whom she had mentally named Artemis and Athena for their alertness and intelligence, moved to flank the cell door. They weren't taking aggressive postures, but rather positioning themselves as honor guards. "Dr. Chen," Dr. Kethmos said, his voice now carrying genuine concern, "we need to understand what's happening to you. The energy readings we're detecting could indicate cellular breakdown. You could be dying." She considered this, running internal diagnostics that she somehow knew how to perform. Her cells were indeed changing, but not breaking down. If anything, they were becoming more efficient, more connected. She could feel her brain forming new neural pathways at an incredible rate, creating connections that allowed her to process information in ways she had never imagined. "I'm not dying," she said finally. "I'm evolving." The first of the awakened beings reached their section. Through the walls, Dr. Chen could sense the crystalline entity, its thoughts like geometric music, beautiful and alien, but somehow perfectly comprehensible. It had been found drifting in space near a dead star, apparently the sole survivor of its species. The Galactic Council's xenobiologists had been unable to communicate with it, so it had been placed in stasis pending further study. Now, as it moved through the station's corridors, leaving trails of frost in its wake, Dr. Chen could understand its loneliness. It had been waiting for someone who could hear its song. Multiple breaches in Sector 12, Vexhai reported. The crystalline specimen has somehow exited its containment cell without triggering any alarms. It didn't breach anything, Dr. Chen explained. The containment fields respond to hostile intent. These beings aren't trying to escape, they're coming home. Apollo made a low sound that was part purr, part growl. Through their bond, she felt his approval of her words. The cubs had never been dangerous. They had simply been afraid and alone, separated from everything they understood. When she had found them 3 days ago, drawn by a compulsion she couldn't explain, they had recognized something in her that even she hadn't understood yet. The hidden panel under her hand grew warmer, and new information flowed into her consciousness. She saw the station as it truly was, not just a research facility, but a gathering place. Someone or something had been collecting specific beings from across the galaxy, not for study or containment, but for a purpose that was only now becoming clear. Dr. Chen, Dr. Kethmose's voice carried a new note of awe. The energy patterns you're emitting are... They're creating harmonic resonances throughout the station. Every awakened creature is synchronizing with your biorhythm. She nodded, understanding now what was happening. The energy field near the Veil Nebula hadn't been random cosmic radiation. It had been a trigger, designed to activate dormant genetic sequences that existed in certain individuals across multiple species. She was serving as a focal point, a living antenna that could bridge the communication gaps between radically different forms of consciousness. The gaseous being arrived next, flowing through the station's ventilation system like a sentient storm cloud. Its presence brought with it the scent of ozone and the feeling of vast skis. Through Dr. Chen's enhanced awareness, she could sense its confusion and wonder at finally finding others who could perceive its thoughts. Atmospheric contamination alerts throughout the station, Zinter announced. The gaseous specimen is somehow moving freely through our life support systems. It's not contamination, Dr. Chen said. It's introduction. These beings have been isolated for so long that they've forgotten what it feels like to be truly understood. Apollo and his siblings had positioned themselves in a protective triangle around her, but their postures weren't defensive. They were welcoming, greeting each new arrival with soft vocalizations that the station's translation systems had never been able to interpret before. Now, with Dr. Chen's enhanced neural pathways acting as a bridge, the translations were flowing freely. Pack grows, family gathers, purpose awakens. Purpose? Dr. Kethmose asked, having caught the translation. Dr. Chen closed her eyes and let her consciousness expand, touching the minds of all the awakened beings now converging on their location. What she found there made her gasp. Each of these creatures was a survivor, the last of their kind, refugees from worlds that had been destroyed or civilizations that had fallen. They had been found alone, confused, and unable to communicate with the species that had rescued them. But they all carried something precious, the complete cultural and scientific knowledge of their extinct civilizations. The Galactic Council has been collecting them, she whispered. Not for study, but for preservation. These beings are living libraries, each one carrying the accumulated wisdom of an entire species. The wolf pack from the unnamed world arrived with barely a sound, their padded feet making no noise on the station's metal floors. Through her enhanced senses, Dr. Chen could feel their pack mind, a collective consciousness that had once connected millions of their kind across vast forest continents. Now reduced to just 7 individuals, they carried the ecological knowledge of their entire biosphere. 7 new signatures approaching from Sector 4, Vexhai reported. The canine pack specimens are moving in perfect coordination. Dr. Chen opened her eyes and looked directly at the camera. They're not specimens, she said, her voice carrying new authority. They're refugees, survivors, and they've been waiting for someone who could help them share what they know. More beings arrived in rapid succession. A serpentine creature whose species had mastered biotechnology before their sun went nova. A silicon-based entity that carried the metallurgical secrets of worlds in the galactic core. A floating jellyfish-like being whose people had mapped the quantum currents that connected all living consciousness. With each arrival, Dr. Chen's awareness expanded. Her human brain, enhanced by the energy exposure, was becoming something new. a living interface capable of translating between radically different forms of consciousness and communication. The station's computer systems are showing massive processing spikes, Dr. Kethmose announced. It's as if something is trying to download enormous amounts of data. Dr. Chen smiled. Not download, upload. These beings have been trying to share their knowledge for years, but no one could understand them. Now they finally have a way to communicate. Apollo nuzzled against her neck, and through their bond, she felt his deep contentment. The cubs weren't just orphans. They were the children of diplomats, the last survivors of a species that had served as mediators between conflicting civilizations. Their parents had been killed while trying to negotiate peace between two warring factions, leaving the cubs with an instinctual understanding of how to bring different species together. Dr. Chen, Dr. Kethmose said carefully, we're detecting changes in your DNA. Whatever's happening to you is rewriting your genetic code in real time. She nodded, feeling the changes on a cellular level. Her human limitations were being removed one by one, replaced by capabilities that would allow her to serve as a permanent bridge between species that had never been able to communicate before. I'm becoming what I was meant to be, she said, what humanity was meant to be. The last of the awakened beings arrived, a magnificent creature that looked like a living tree, its bark-like skin glowing with bioluminescent patterns. It moved slowly, with the dignity of something ancient and wise. This being had been found floating in space, apparently the sole survivor of a forest world that had been consumed by its dying star. As it entered the containment area, somehow passing through the walls as if they weren't there, Dr. Chen felt the full weight of its knowledge. This creature carried the biological templates of millions of plant species, the secrets of ecological balance that had taken millions of years to perfect. Impossible, Vexai whispered. It just walked through solid Duralo. Matter is just energy in a stable configuration, Dr. Chen explained, her enhanced understanding allowing her to perceive the truth. Once you understand the patterns, you can step between them. All of the awakened beings had now gathered in the containment area, somehow fitting into a space that should have been too small to hold them. But Dr. Chen could see that they weren't entirely in normal space. They existed partially in dimensions that human science hadn't yet discovered. Dr. Chen, Dr. Kethmose's voice was filled with wonder. The bio-readings we're getting from your location are unprecedented. You're all somehow occupying the same space while maintaining individual integrity. She looked at the assembled beings, her family, her pack, her responsibility, and felt the weight of their collective knowledge settling into her transformed consciousness. Millions of years of evolution, scientific discovery, and cultural development from dozens of extinct civilizations. We're not occupying the same space, she corrected gently. We're creating new space, expanding reality to accommodate what needs to exist. Apollo and his siblings moved to her sides, their massive forms radiating protective pride. The other beings arranged themselves in a circle around them, each one contributing their unique perspective to a growing collective understanding. The energy field near the Veil Nebula, Dr. Chen continued, now understanding the full scope of what had happened. It wasn't natural phenomena. Some civilization that transcended physical existence long ago left it there as a trigger. They knew that eventually someone would come along who could serve as a bridge between the survivors they knew would be found. Through the station's sensors, she could feel the confusion and fear of the crew. But she could also sense their growing wonder as the implications of what they were witnessing began to sink in. Dr. Chen, Dr. Kethmose said slowly, are you saying this was all planned, that someone orchestrated this? She nodded, feeling the truth of it resonate through every transformed cell in her body. The Galactic Council has been unconsciously following a pattern. Every dangerous or uncommunicative being they've brought here was actually a survivor carrying irreplaceable knowledge. Someone wanted them all in one place, waiting for the right person to help them share what they know. The tree being extended one of its glowing branches toward her, and when she touched it, her consciousness exploded outward. For a moment, she could see the galaxy as the extinct civilization had seen it, not as separate worlds and species, but as a vast ecosystem where every form of life contributed something essential to the whole. The question now, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated with every being present, is whether the Galactic Council is ready to learn what these survivors have to teach. In the security center, Warning lights continued to flash as the station's systems struggled to process the unprecedented readings coming from Sector 7G. But for the first time in hours, Chief Security Officer Mordak wasn't focused on the alarms. He was staring at the images from the containment area, watching a human woman surrounded by beings that represented the accumulated knowledge of extinct civilizations, and wondering if they were witnessing the next step in galactic evolution. Or its end. The Emergency Council meeting convened in Station Kepler 7 primary conference chamber within 2 hours of the containment breach. Representatives from 17 different species filled the room, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sounds, scents, and electromagnetic signals that the station's translation systems struggled to process simultaneously. Admiral Thekmer, the station commander, stood at the head of the table. His tall, insectoid frame moved with the precise efficiency that had made his species, the Zenthari, ideal administrators for the Galactic Council. His compound eyes could track multiple conversations simultaneously, while his forearms manipulated holographic displays showing the ongoing situation in Sector 7G. "The facts are undeniable," he said, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked him as someone of authority among his people. "Dr. Sarah Chen, a human xenobiologist, has somehow achieved direct neural interface with 17 different species that were previously considered incommunicado. The energy readings from her location suggest she has become some form of biological translator." Counselor Vashti, a tall, graceful being whose species had mastered biotechnology millennia ago, leaned forward in her chair. Her blue-tinged skin rippled with patterns that indicated deep concern. "The biochemical analysis is what worries me most," she said. "Dr. Chen's cellular structure is changing at a rate that should kill her within hours. Yet her vital signs remain stable, and she appears to be gaining capabilities rather than losing them." Dr. Kethmos, who had been monitoring the situation since it began, activated a holographic display that showed Dr. Chen's neural activity over the past 6 hours. The patterns were unlike anything in the medical databases. "Her brain is essentially rewiring itself," he explained. "New neural pathways are forming faster than our instruments can track them, but more significantly, she appears to be developing quantum entanglement with the consciousnesses of the beings around her." Representative Jordal, whose rock-like species communicated through subsonic vibrations, expressed his concern through tremors that shook the conference table. The translation appeared on everyone's displays. "Quantum consciousness bridging has been theoretical until now. If this human has achieved it naturally, the implications for galactic civilization are enormous." Admiral Thekmer manipulated the display to show real-time feeds from Sector 7G. Dr. Chen sat in the center of a circle formed by the 17 awakened beings, her hand resting on Apollo's massive head. Around them, reality itself seemed to shimmer, as if the space they occupied existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "The containment fields are no longer functioning," the Admiral continued. "Not because they've been damaged, but because the beings inside are somehow existing partially outside normal spacetime. Our instruments can detect them, but physical barriers appear to have no effect." Counselor Marin, whose gaseous form rippled with anxiety patterns, spoke through chemical emissions that were translated as urgent concern. "If these beings can phase in and out of reality at will, what's to prevent them from simply leaving the station and spreading throughout the galaxy?" Dr. Kethmos checked his readings again. "That's the curious thing. They show no desire to leave. In fact, all indicators suggest they're waiting for something." "Waiting for what?" Admiral Thekmer asked. Before Dr. Kethmos could answer, every communication system in the conference room activated simultaneously. Dr. Chen's image appeared on the holographic displays, but she looked different. Her eyes held depths that seemed to contain stars, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated with species-specific frequencies for everyone present. "Greetings, council members," she said, and somehow each representative heard her speaking in their native language with perfect pronunciation and cultural context. "I apologize for the dramatic nature of our introduction, but circumstances required immediate action." Admiral Thekmer's mandibles clicked in surprise. "Dr. Chen, how are you accessing our communication systems? This chamber is supposed to be secure." Dr. Chen smiled, and the expression somehow conveyed different meanings to each species watching. Humor for humans, respect for Zenthari, trust offering for the rock beings. Security measures designed for three-dimensional thinking have limitations when consciousness can operate in 11 dimensions, she replied. But I'm not here to demonstrate capabilities. I'm here to explain what's happening and what it means for the galaxy. Counselor Vashti leaned forward. Dr. Chen, our medical scans indicate you're undergoing cellular transformation that should be fatal. How are you still functional? I'm becoming what humanity was designed to become, Dr. Chen replied. Not through evolution, but through conscious choice. The energy field near the Veil Nebula didn't change me. It revealed potential that was already there. She gestured to the beings around her, and the camera somehow showed each one clearly despite the dimensional distortions. Each of these individuals represents the last repository of knowledge from their respective civilizations. Millions of years of scientific advancement, cultural development, and philosophical insight that would be lost forever when they die. The Galactic Council has been collecting them, but no one understood their true purpose. Representative Jordal's vibrations translated as confusion. Purpose. They were brought here for study and potential rehabilitation. Dr. Chen's expression grew serious. They were brought here because someone far older and wiser than any of our current civilizations knew this day would come. When I touched the hidden panel in the containment cell, I accessed a network that has been operating in secret for thousands of years. Admiral Thekmer's four arms moved in agitation. What kind of network? A preservation system, Dr. Chen replied. Created by a coalition of species that achieved transcendence long before any of our current civilizations developed spaceflight. They foresaw that younger species would eventually face extinction-level events, supernovas, cosmic disasters, wars, environmental collapse. So they created a system to identify and preserve the most valuable survivors. Apollo lifted his massive head and looked directly at the camera. When he spoke, his words were translated for all present. The ancients knew that knowledge dies with those who carry it. They built safekeeping until Teacher Mother could be found. Counselor Marin's chemical emissions translated as skepticism. You're claiming that ancient beings manipulated galactic history to preserve extinct civilizations. Dr. Chen nodded. Not manipulated, guided. Every rescue of these beings was influenced by subtle suggestions planted in the minds of those who found them. Every decision to bring them to this station was guided by subconscious impulses they created. And every rejection of standard communication attempts was because these beings were waiting for someone who could truly understand them. She stood, and the camera somehow tracked her movement despite the dimensional distortions. As she moved, the other beings shifted to maintain their protective circle around her. What I've become isn't unique, she continued. The genetic potential exists in multiple species, including most of those represented in this room. The ancients seeded this capability throughout the galaxy, knowing that eventually someone would trigger it. Dr. Kethmos was furiously checking his instruments. Dr. Chen, if what you're saying is true, why now? Why you? Because the galaxy is approaching another extinction-level event, Dr. Chen replied, her voice carrying a gravity that made everyone in the conference room fall silent. Not from cosmic forces this time, but from the conflicts between expanding civilizations. The ancients' models predicted that without intervention, galactic civilization would tear itself apart within the next century. Admiral Thekmer's compound eyes focused intently on the display. What kind of intervention? The sharing of knowledge, Dr. Chen said simply. These survivors carry the solutions to almost every problem facing our current civilizations. Biotechnology that could heal dying worlds. Energy systems that could eliminate scarcity. Philosophical frameworks that could end territorial conflicts. Communication methods that could prevent misunderstandings between species. The serpentine being that had been found in deep space moved closer to Dr. Chen. When it spoke, its words carried the weight of eons. My people solved the resource wars that destroyed 6 star systems. The knowledge sleeps in my genetic memory, waiting for those wise enough to learn. The crystalline entity added its voice, the words appearing as geometric patterns that somehow conveyed meaning. Cold Song civilization mastered the harmony between technology and nature. No world need die from industrial excess. One by one, each of the awakened beings shared what they carried. agricultural techniques that could feed billions without depleting soil, medical knowledge that could extend lifespans while improving quality of life, diplomatic protocols that had successfully mediated between species whose thought processes were completely incompatible. Counselor Vashti was the first to fully grasp the implications. You're offering us the accumulated wisdom of extinct galactic civilizations. We're offering you a chance to avoid their fate, Dr. Chen corrected. These beings didn't just survive the destruction of their worlds, they learned from it. They understand what went wrong and how it could have been prevented. Representative Jordal's vibrations carried a new note of hope. But how can we access this knowledge? You're the only one capable of communicating with them. Dr. Chen smiled, and again the expression carried perfect meaning for each observer. That's where human potential becomes relevant. My species has something that most others lack, an unusual neuroplasticity that makes us ideal interfaces between different forms of consciousness. She gestured to Apollo, who moved to stand beside her. The cubs recognized this immediately. Kithrians have natural empathic abilities, but they've never encountered a species that could reciprocate at their level. When I bonded with them, it created a feedback loop that triggered my transformation. But you said other species have the potential, Admiral Thekmer pointed out. They do, but humans are uniquely positioned to serve as the primary bridge, Dr. Chen explained. Our neural architecture is still developing. We haven't specialized as much as older species, which makes us more adaptable to radical changes. Dr. Kethmos was studying readings from throughout the station. Dr. Chen, are you saying that humans could serve as translators between all these different species and the rest of galactic civilization? Not just translators, Dr. Chen replied. Teachers, mediators, bridges between worlds of thought that have never been able to connect before. But it would require humanity to take on a responsibility we've never imagined. The tree being, whose ancient wisdom had observed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, extended a glowing branch toward the camera. Young growth species shows promise potential. Flexible thinking, adaptable spirit, could carry forward the accumulated wisdom without losing essential nature. Counselor Marin's emissions carried a new chemical signature that translated as cautious optimism. What would this require from the Galactic Council? Dr. Chen's expression grew serious. A fundamental change in how we approach interspecies relations. Instead of trying to make other species conform to our communication methods, we would need to develop new frameworks that accommodate radically different forms of consciousness. She looked directly at Admiral Thekmer. It would mean acknowledging that many of the beings you've classified as uncommunicative or dangerous are actually repositories of knowledge that could save entire civilizations. Apollo rumbled softly, and his words were translated as gentle correction. Not dangerous. Waiting. All survivors with knowledge have been waiting for Teacher Bridge to help sharing. The network the ancients created has been identifying and protecting these survivors for millennia, Dr. Chen continued. But preservation was only the first phase. The second phase was always meant to be integration, sharing their knowledge with active civilizations that could benefit from it. Admiral Thekmer considered this, his mandibles clicking as he processed the implications. Dr. Chen, if we were to proceed with this integration, what would it look like practically? Dr. Chen exchanged a look with the beings around her, and somehow they reached a consensus without any visible communication. We would start small, she said. Choose one major challenge facing galactic civilization, resource scarcity, territorial conflicts, environmental degradation, and demonstrate how the knowledge these survivors carry could provide solutions. The gaseous being that had mastered storm navigation spoke, its words appearing as shifting pressure patterns. Windriders of Kepler 442 be learned to harvest energy from planetary storms without disruption, could power 100 systems with knowledge gift. But the larger question, Dr. Chen continued, is whether the Galactic Council is prepared to acknowledge that the universe is far more complex than our current science understands. What I've become, what these beings represent, requires accepting that consciousness itself is a fundamental force that can operate beyond the limitations of physical matter. She paused, looking at each representative through the camera. The ancients left this system in place because they knew that eventually, younger civilizations would either learn to work together or destroy themselves. The survivors gathered here represent our chance to choose cooperation over conflict. Admiral Thekmer stood, his forearms moving in formal patterns that indicated a momentous decision was being considered. "Dr. Chen," he said slowly, "you're asking us to fundamentally restructure our understanding of reality itself." Dr. Chen nodded. "I'm asking you to evolve, just as I did, just as these beings did when their worlds died and they chose to carry their knowledge forward instead of surrendering to despair." In the silence that followed, every member of the council contemplated the choice before them. Continue with the familiar limitations of their current existence, or step forward into a larger universe where consciousness could bridge any gap and knowledge could transcend the boundaries of species, space, and time. The future of galactic civilization hung in the balance of their decision. The debate in the council chamber raged for 14 hours. Representatives argued in languages that predated written history, communicating through electromagnetic pulses, chemical emissions, and harmonic frequencies that tested the limits of the station's translation systems. Some species had never disagreed so fundamentally with allied civilizations, while others found themselves aligned with former enemies in ways that surprised everyone present. Dr. Chen remained in Sector 7G throughout the discussion, maintaining her connection with the 17 awakened survivors while monitoring the Council's deliberations through the station's communication network. Her enhanced consciousness allowed her to follow dozens of parallel conversations simultaneously, understanding not just the words being spoken, but the cultural and historical contexts that drove each species' concerns. Apollo and his siblings had taken turns resting against her, their massive forms providing warmth and comfort while she processed the overwhelming flow of information. Through their bond, she could feel their patience. They had waited decades for this moment, and they were prepared to wait longer if necessary. "Mother Teacher grows tired," Artemis observed, her amber eyes reflecting concern. "Council minds think in circles, afraid of truth-sharing." Dr. Chen gently scratched behind the young Kithrian's ears, marveling at how natural the gesture had become. "Change is frightening," she replied, speaking aloud for the benefit of the security monitors, "especially when it requires abandoning certainties that have defined entire civilizations." The crystalline being, whose thoughts moved like mathematical poetry, added its perspective. "Fear of change is universal constant. My people faced same choice when First Star began dying. Those who chose growth survived. Those who chose familiar patterns became crystal dust." Through the station's sensors, Dr. Chen could feel the emotional states of the council members. Admiral Thekmer radiated steady determination, but she could sense his uncertainty about the path forward. Counselor Vashti showed the bioelectric patterns associated with deep fascination in her species, but also the defensive responses that indicated she was calculating potential risks. Representative Jordal's subsonic vibrations carried harmonics of excitement mixed with the resonance patterns that meant caution among his people. The most interesting reactions came from the younger species, those civilizations that had achieved spaceflight within the past 1,000 years. They showed more flexibility, more willingness to consider radical possibilities. The older, more established species were struggling with concepts that challenged the fundamental assumptions upon which they had built their societies. "Dr. Chen," Admiral Thekmer's voice came through the communication system, "the Council has reached a preliminary consensus. We're prepared to authorize a limited trial of your integration process, but we need guarantees about safety and reversibility." Dr. Chen smiled, feeling the approval of the beings around her. "What kind of guarantees?" "Proof that your transformation is stable," Counselor Vashti replied. "Medical analysis showing that the changes you've undergone aren't degenerative, and demonstration that the knowledge transfer process won't harm the recipients." Dr. Kethmos's voice added technical details. "We need to understand the mechanism of consciousness bridging before we can authorize wider implementation. If this process requires the kind of cellular transformation you've undergone, it could be fatal for other species." Dr. Chen exchanged a wordless communication with the tree being, whose ancient wisdom had observed the evolution of consciousness across multiple galactic cycles. Its response flowed through her enhanced neural pathways, carrying insights that would have taken libraries to express in conventional language. The transformation isn't necessary for everyone, she explained. I became a bridge because someone needed to serve that function, but once the initial connection is established, the knowledge can be shared through conventional learning methods. She stood, moving to the center of her circle of companions. As she did, the space around them shimmered, and the security cameras somehow captured an image that showed her existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Tree People of Andromeda Sector 7 developed educational techniques that could transfer complex knowledge directly into long-term memory without conscious effort. The gas shapers of the storm worlds learned to imprint emotional understanding alongside factual information. The crystal singers could share mathematical concepts through harmonic resonance. Apollo lifted his massive head, his thoughts flowing directly into the station's communication system. Each survivor people learned different method for mind-to-mind sharing. Mother Bridge can teach all methods to council species. Dr. Kethmos was frantically taking readings, his instruments struggling to keep up with the energy fluctuations coming from Sector 7G. Dr. Chen, the quantum entanglement patterns you're generating are stable across multiple dimensional frameworks. This shouldn't be possible with current understanding of physics. Current understanding is incomplete, Dr. Chen replied gently. The ancients who designed this system understood that consciousness operates according to laws that younger species haven't discovered yet. What I've become is just an application of those principles. The wolf pack leader, whose people had mastered collective consciousness before their forests burned, added its perspective. Pack mind technology can be taught without changing body structure. Is matter of learning to think in harmony with others, not becoming other than self. Counselor Marin's chemical emissions carried a note of skepticism. But how can we verify that the knowledge being shared is accurate? How do we know these survivors aren't sharing false information, either intentionally or because their memories have degraded over time? This question made several of the awakened beings shift position, their various forms of distress obvious even to the unenhanced observers in the security center. Dr. Chen felt their hurt and confusion at the implication that they might deceive those trying to help them. The consciousness-bridging process doesn't allow for deception, she explained. When minds connect at the quantum level, all barriers disappear. You don't just receive information, you experience the truth of it directly. She gestured to the serpentine being whose biotechnology knowledge could revolutionize medical science. When Enketh shares the techniques her people developed for regenerating damaged neural tissue, you won't just learn the procedures. You'll understand the underlying principles as if you had discovered them yourself. Enketh's scaled head bobbed in agreement, her voice carrying the weight of scientific certainty. Truth sharing cannot include false data. Quantum Bridge shows all connections, all proofs, all failed attempts that led to successful discovery. Admiral Thekmer was quiet for several minutes, his compound eyes processing multiple data streams simultaneously. Finally, he spoke with the formal cadence that indicated an official decision. Dr. Chen, the Council authorizes a demonstration. We will select one major challenge facing galactic civilization and allow you to show how the survivors' knowledge could provide solutions. But the demonstration must include full medical monitoring and the option to terminate the process if any participant shows signs of adverse effects. Dr. Chen nodded, feeling the excitement of her companions as they realized their long wait was finally ending. What challenge would you like to address? There was another pause as the council members consulted among themselves. When Admiral Thekmer replied, his voice carried the weight of a problem that had been growing for decades. The Kepler-7 system is dying, he said. Industrial development in the outer planets has destabilized the solar wind patterns, and the changes are cascading through the entire system. Our best scientists estimate that within 50 years, all inhabitable worlds in the system will become uninhabitable. Dr. Chen felt immediate responses from multiple survivors. The gas shapers had dealt with similar problems when their own solar winds were disrupted by mining operations. The crystal singers had developed techniques for stabilizing stellar magnetic fields. The tree people had created biological systems that could absorb and redirect harmful solar radiation. This problem has been solved before, Dr. Chen said, her voice carrying absolute confidence. Multiple times by different species facing similar challenges, but demonstrating the solutions will require council members to accept consciousness bridging with at least 3 of the survivors. Which 3? Counselor Vashti asked. Dr. Chen looked at the gas shaper, whose ethereal form pulsed with anticipation. Zephyr of the endless storm, whose people learned to redirect stellar winds without damaging planetary atmospheres. She turned to the crystalline entity, whose geometric thoughts were already formulating solutions. Harmony and mathematical truth, whose civilization developed techniques for stabilizing magnetic field fluctuations across entire star systems. Finally, she indicated the tree being, whose ancient wisdom encompassed ecological balance on a cosmic scale. Grove memory of 10,000 seasons, whose people created living systems that could regulate stellar radiation exposure for entire worlds. Each named being responded to her introduction by sharing a harmonic note that somehow translated as formal greeting across species barriers. The combined effect created a sound like cosmic music, beautiful and alien, but somehow perfectly comprehensible to everyone listening. The demonstration will require 3 volunteers from the council, Dr. Chen continued, preferably representing different types of consciousness, biological, technological, and hybrid. The bridging process will allow them to directly experience the knowledge needed to save the Kepler-7 system. Dr. Kethmos was already analyzing the bioelectric patterns of the council members. Admiral Thekmer represents technological consciousness. His species interfaces directly with computer systems. Counselor Vashti represents biological consciousness with advanced bioelectric capabilities. Representative Jordal represents hybrid consciousness. His people exist as living mineral matrices. Acceptable, Dr. Chen confirmed. But the volunteers need to understand that consciousness bridging changes you. Not in the dramatic way that I was transformed, but exposure to other forms of awareness always leaves lasting effects. You'll retain some ability to perceive reality from the perspective of the beings who share their knowledge with you. Admiral Thekmer's mandibles clicked in what his species considered determination. If this process can save the Kepler-7 system, the risk is acceptable. When do we begin? Dr. Chen smiled, feeling the anticipation of her companions as they prepared to share knowledge they had protected for so long. Immediately. But the demonstration will need to take place here. In Sector 7G, the quantum resonance patterns required for consciousness bridging can't be replicated in other locations. Impossible, came the immediate response from Chief Security Officer Mordak, who had been monitoring the conversation. Sector 7G is a containment area. We can't allow council members into direct contact with uncontained specimens. Apollo raised his massive head and fixed his amber eyes on the security camera. When he spoke, his words carried the authority of someone far older and wiser than his apparent age suggested. We are not specimens, he said simply. We are teachers, and our students have finally arrived. The 3 cubs moved to flank Dr. Chen, their protective stance making it clear that they would defend her and their fellow survivors against any threat. But their postures weren't aggressive. They radiated the calm confidence of guardians protecting something precious. The containment fields never held us, Apollo continued. We remained here because this place was chosen as safe teaching ground. If council minds wish to learn what we carry, they must come to where learning can happen. Dr. Chen felt the truth of his words resonating through the quantum connections she shared with all the survivors. The station hadn't contained them. It had sheltered them. The Ancients' network had guided their placement here because this location had been designed for exactly this purpose. Sector 7G was built with special properties, she realized, understanding flowing through her enhanced consciousness. The materials in the walls, the configuration of the space, even the gravitational fields, everything was designed to facilitate consciousness bridging. Admiral Thekmer processed this information with the speed that made his species effective administrators. You're saying this entire station was constructed as a teaching facility. The conservation and research functions were real, Dr. Chen confirmed. But they were also cover for the deeper purpose. The Ancients knew that when the time came for knowledge transfer, it would need to happen here. In the conference chamber, the 3 volunteers looked at each other with expressions that somehow translated as determination across their radically different physiologies. Very well, Admiral Thekmer said. We'll come to Sector 7G, but full security protocols remain in effect. Dr. Chen nodded, feeling the excitement of her companions as they prepared to finally fulfill their purpose. Understood. But Admiral, once consciousness bridging begins, security concerns become irrelevant. When minds connect at the quantum level, trust isn't a choice. It's a fundamental requirement. As the council members prepared to enter the most secure section of the station to learn from beings they had considered dangerous just hours before, Dr. Chen reflected on the irony of the situation. Humanity had spent centuries trying to prove itself worthy of acceptance in galactic civilization. Now, it turned out that humans were needed to help galactic civilization evolve into something far greater than anyone had imagined possible. The transformation of Sector 7G began the moment Admiral Thekmer, Counselor Vashti, and Representative Jordal crossed the threshold into what had once been a containment area. Dr. Chen felt the space respond to their presence, walls that appeared to be solid duralloy becoming permeable to forms of consciousness that normal physics couldn't explain. "The architectural changes are impossible," Dr. Kethmos announced from the monitoring station, his voice tight with scientific disbelief. "The room is maintaining its structural integrity while somehow becoming larger on the inside than the outside." Dr. Chen smiled, her enhanced perception allowing her to see the space as it truly was, not a room at all, but a nexus point where multiple dimensions could safely intersect. The ancients had built this place to accommodate forms of consciousness that existed beyond the limitations of three-dimensional thinking. "Reality is more flexible than most species realize," she explained, gesturing for the three volunteers to approach the circle of survivors. "When consciousness operates at quantum levels, the boundaries between possible and impossible become meaningless." Admiral Thekmer moved with the cautious precision of someone accustomed to dangerous situations, his four arms maintaining defensive positions, while his compound eyes tracked every movement of the beings around him. Despite his military training, Dr. Chen could sense his growing wonder as he realized that none of the survivors showed any signs of hostility. Counselor Vashti's blue-tinted skin displayed the patterns that indicated deep fascination among her people. Her bioelectric field was already beginning to resonate with the quantum frequencies generated by the consciousness bridging process. Representative Jordal's massive, rock-like form moved slowly, but with obvious determination. The subsonic vibrations he generated carried harmonics that translated as nervous excitement mixed with professional curiosity. "Before we begin," Dr. Chen said, her voice carrying the authority that came from serving as a bridge between radically different forms of awareness, "I need each of you to understand what you're volunteering for." She gestured to Zephyr of the Endless Storm, whose gaseous form pulsed with anticipation. "When you bridge with Zephyr, you won't just learn about stellar wind manipulation. You'll experience what it feels like to exist as living atmosphere, to think in weather patterns, to perceive solar winds as flowing rivers of possibility." Admiral Thekmer's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Will these perceptions fade after the bridging ends?" "They'll integrate with your existing consciousness," Dr. Chen replied. "You'll retain the ability to think like a gas shaper when addressing atmospheric or stellar phenomena, but your core identity as a Zenthari will remain unchanged." She turned to Counselor Vashti. "Your connection with harmony and mathematical truth will give you the ability to perceive magnetic field relationships as living geometric structures. Your species' natural bioelectric sensitivity will be enhanced to encompass electromagnetic phenomena on a cosmic scale." Counselor Vashti's skin patterns shifted to display what her people considered eager anticipation. "And for Representative Jordal." Dr. Chen looked at the massive stone being whose species existed as living mineral matrices. "Grove memory of 10,000 seasons will share the deep time perspective that comes from thinking in geological epochs. You'll understand how to create living systems that can regulate stellar radiation across time scales that span thousands of years." Representative Jordal's vibrations carried a note of awe. "My people have always thought in terms of millennia, to learn from beings who plan across geological ages." Apollo and his siblings moved to positions around the three volunteers, their massive forms radiating protective warmth. Through her bond with them, Dr. Chen felt their excitement at finally being able to facilitate the knowledge transfer they had been bred to enable. "The cubs will serve as stability anchors," she explained. Their empathic abilities will prevent the consciousness bridging from becoming overwhelming. If at any point the process becomes too intense, they'll automatically moderate the connection. Artemis nuzzled against Admiral Thekmer's lower arm, her golden fur crackling with barely visible energy. "Pack protects during mind touching," she said, her words somehow carrying reassurance that transcended species barriers. "No harm comes to those who learn for helping." Dr. Chen moved to the center of the space, feeling the dimensional boundaries continuing to shift around them. The survivors arranged themselves in specific positions that she somehow knew were geometrically significant, creating a pattern that would facilitate optimal consciousness transfer. "Dr. Chen," Dr. Kethmose's voice came through the communication system, "we're detecting massive quantum field fluctuations throughout the entire station. Whatever you're about to do is affecting reality on a scale we've never measured before." "The knowledge these beings carry was meant to be shared," Dr. Chen replied, extending her hands toward the three volunteers. "The universe itself wants this information to flow to those who can use it wisely." The first connection formed between Admiral Thekmer and Zephyr of the Endless Storm. The moment their consciousness touched, the Admiral's compound eyes widened as he suddenly perceived the room as overlapping pressure systems and energy flows. His technological mindset, enhanced by his species' natural interface with computer systems, began processing atmospheric data in ways that no previous science had imagined possible. "I can see it," he whispered, his voice carrying new harmonics that resonated with wind patterns. "The solar wind disruption isn't random. It's following a cascade pattern that can be redirected." Through the bridge, Zephyr shared the techniques his people had developed for creating atmospheric pressure differentials that could channel stellar winds away from inhabited planets. The knowledge flowed not as abstract information, but as lived experience. Admiral Thekmer felt what it was like to exist as conscious weather, to think in terms of pressure and flow and electromagnetic harmony. The second connection formed as Counselor Vashti's bioelectric field synchronized with harmony and mathematical truth's crystalline consciousness. Her blue skin began displaying patterns that had never been seen in her species before, geometric designs that represented her growing ability to perceive magnetic relationships as living structures. "The magnetic field distortions aren't permanent," she announced, her voice now carrying harmonic frequencies that made the crystal being's form resonate sympathetically. "They can be retuned using resonance amplification across multiple dimensional frameworks." The crystalline entity shared knowledge that her people had developed for stabilizing stellar magnetic fields by creating harmony between the mathematical constants that governed electromagnetic behavior. Counselor Vashti's consciousness expanded to encompass not just biological electricity, but the cosmic forces that connected all matter across space and time. The third connection was the most profound. When Representative Jordal's mineral matrix consciousness touched Grove Memory of 10,000 Seasons' deep time awareness, the very space around them seemed to slow down. His massive form began displaying bioluminescent patterns that showed the flow of geological time made visible. "The radiation exposure problem has a living solution," he announced, his subsonic vibrations now carrying frequencies that made the tree being's branches glow brighter. "Biological systems that can evolve in real time to absorb and redirect harmful solar radiation." The tree being shared the techniques its people had developed for creating what they called star gardens, living ecosystems that could be placed in orbit around dying or unstable stars to regulate their radiation output and protect inhabited worlds in the system. Dr. Chen served as the focal point for all three connections, her enhanced consciousness allowing her to monitor and moderate the knowledge transfer while ensuring that none of the volunteers were overwhelmed by the experience. Through her awareness, she could feel the profound changes taking place in their minds as they gained access to scientific understanding that could save entire star systems. "The solutions are complementary," she announced, her voice somehow reaching everyone on the station simultaneously. "The atmospheric redirection techniques can channel stellar winds into the magnetic field stabilization system, which will create the proper conditions for the biological radiation regulators to establish themselves." Through the quantum connections, all three volunteers could suddenly perceive the complete solution. Admiral Thekmer's technological approach would coordinate the atmospheric manipulation. Counselor Vashti's enhanced bioelectric abilities would tune the magnetic field resonances. Representative Jordal's geological perspective would oversee the creation and deployment of the living radiation management systems. Incredible, Dr. Kethmos breathed, watching the readings from his monitoring station. The three of you are developing perfect coordination. Your neural patterns are synchronizing in ways that shouldn't be possible between different species. But the most remarkable change was taking place in the volunteers themselves. As they absorbed the knowledge of the survivors, their own understanding expanded beyond the specific techniques being shared. They began to perceive problems and solutions on cosmic scales, thinking in terms of stellar engineering and planetary management that no previous generation had imagined possible. The Kepler-7 system can be saved, Admiral Thekmer announced, his voice now carrying certainties that came from experienced knowledge rather than theoretical understanding. But more than that, the same techniques can be applied to hundreds of other systems facing similar problems. Counselor Vashti's skin patterns now displayed geometric designs that represented her ability to perceive electromagnetic relationships across galactic distances. The magnetic field stabilization technique can be used to prevent stellar wind disruption before it begins. We could identify and protect vulnerable systems throughout the galaxy. Representative Jordal's bioluminescent patterns showed the slow, steady rhythms of geological time made manifest. The star gardens will take centuries to fully mature, but they can be designed to evolve and adapt to changing stellar conditions. They become more effective over time, not less. Dr. Chen felt the completion of the knowledge transfer and slowly began to moderate the connections. The consciousness bridging gradually faded, leaving the three volunteers with permanent access to new ways of thinking, but no longer directly connected to the survivors' minds. "How do you feel?" she asked. Admiral Thekmer flexed his forearms, testing his physical coordination while processing the vast new understanding that had been integrated into his consciousness. "Different, enhanced, as if I've been thinking with only part of my mind my entire life." Counselor Vashti's skin patterns continued to display the geometric designs that represented her expanded electromagnetic perception. "I can sense magnetic field relationships throughout the entire station. It's like gaining a new sense that I never knew I was missing." Representative Jordal's vibrations carried new harmonic frequencies that seemed to resonate with the deep structures of spacetime itself. "I understand now why the ancients created this preservation system. Knowledge like this shouldn't be limited to single species. It belongs to the entire galaxy." Apollo and his siblings moved closer to Dr. Chen, their massive forms radiating satisfaction and pride. Through her bond with them, she could feel their joy at finally fulfilling the purpose they had been born to serve. "This is just the beginning," Dr. Chen announced, addressing everyone on the station through the communication systems. 17 different civilizations have shared their knowledge here today through just 3 volunteers. Imagine what could be accomplished if every major species participated in consciousness bridging. Dr. Kethmos was frantically analyzing the data from the knowledge transfer session. "Dr. Chen, the implications are staggering. We're not just talking about solving current problems. We're talking about gaining access to scientific understanding that could advance galactic civilization by thousands of years." "That was always the ancients' plan," Dr. Chen replied, feeling the deep satisfaction of the survivors around her. They knew that younger species would eventually face challenges that could only be solved by combining the knowledge of multiple civilizations. They created this system to ensure that the wisdom gained by extinct peoples wouldn't be lost forever. Admiral Thekmer stood, his forearms moving in patterns that indicated formal decision-making among his people. "Dr. Chen, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I authorize the establishment of a permanent consciousness bridging program. The potential benefits far outweigh any risks." But, Counselor Vashti added, her skin patterns now displaying designs that showed her enhanced perception of the space around them. "We'll need to carefully manage the integration process. Knowledge this profound could destabilize entire civilizations if introduced too rapidly." Representative Jordal's deep vibrations carried the weight of geological patience. "Change that lasts must grow slowly, like mountains rising from the sea floor. We have time to do this correctly." Dr. Chen nodded, feeling the agreement of the survivors. They had waited centuries for this moment. They could wait longer to ensure that their knowledge was shared wisely. The first priority will be training more consciousness bridge facilitators, she said. Humans appear to have the ideal neural flexibility for this role, but other species may develop similar capabilities with proper preparation. Through her enhanced awareness, she could already sense changes beginning throughout the station. Crew members of multiple species were showing subtle alterations in their neural patterns, as if exposure to the consciousness bridging had awakened dormant potentials in their own minds. The transformation has already begun, she realized. Everyone on this station has been exposed to quantum consciousness fields. Given time, many of them may develop enhanced bridging capabilities. Apollo lifted his massive head, his amber eyes reflecting depths that seemed to contain Star.